Okay, so today I fixed my broken big gun, I hope. I built some steel interfaces. This is a very heavy chassis down here. This is solid steel. And this, of course, is solid steel. It's got a big heavy scope. But between here and here, I had done a conventional bedding job in this stock. Just a heavy, I have this hollowed out and I had a lot of glass in there and stuff, but there was a slippage there. So I made a steel plate about this long that bolts to the metal chassis that's up under here. I can't be clear on it. It's got notches in it, and then I made a metal plate that fits on the bottom of this action. And I think I've got the gun fixed, but I've made some brass. We've been doing this brass turning thing, and I've made some brass cases for it. So I think today I'm going to show you something that maybe you hadn't thought of, a different use for this Teslong bore scope. By now, pretty much everybody who has spent more than 10 minutes of their life on the internet knows what this little Teslong guy is. And this has been a problem with me for a long time. What I have done, oddly enough, this happens to be sitting here. You guys are going to think I'm fake. This is a case. You can see through it there. Maybe if I put it in front of here, you'll be able to see. There you go. You can see through it. This is a case that has been modified to do the job that I'm going to do right now with this Teslong bore scope. This case has been modified, and I'm looking down here at the monitor, and you have to bear with this click, 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 click thing. When I'm doing this in and out, close and far stuff, I need to leave the, or I've chosen to, or my equipment has chosen to. I've got an autofocus on the camera, and I've had a couple of people say, "What is that horrendous clicking in there?" I'm sorry. In the past, when I started, I knew it was there, so I ran music in the background, and it got rid of it. The music and the software in the phone made it so that you couldn't, there would just be a gentle soundtrack, but I got in trouble. Well, I think I'm in trouble with that. So now I'm running it naked. I'll try, if I talk loud, it kind of goes away, or if I run a fan, I'm thinking about setting up an ambient noise thing. But that aside, I'm sorry about the clicking. I'll turn that clicking off just as quick as I can. But this right here, this case, this modification to this case, was done specifically so that I could stick my Hawkeye through the back of it so that I could check something called gap space. And now that's the handiest thing about this Hawkeye, this little endoscope from Teslong, has been the usage of it for checking gap space. Y'all know what these are. This is a typical used barrel. It's got, I think everybody by now has looked in and seen what the lands look like, see the fire cracking and the usage and the this and the that. So handy tool. I'm not going to use it for, I'm not going to spend much time showing you this picture because it doesn't show up very well on there anyway. But what I am going to do is come back here. I've got a case in here, and I'm going to run this case in, and I'm going to slide it up, and let's see what the gap space looks like. There's the end of that case. We're up in the case now, we're coming out. That right there, oddly enough, is the gap space. Right up here is the fire cracking area, you can see, and the freeboard, and we're going into a rifling land. Right there is a rifling land. Those of you that are familiar with this tool will recognize some of this stuff. Now I go in, there's the end of the chamber neck. I go in a little further, there's the end of the case. And if I tighten this down, see how that's getting close? That means that case doesn't need to be trimmed. I keep them really tight. But it's a handy way. This is a great way. I'll go ahead and... Now we're tightened all the way down, and you'll see that my gap space is down to virtually 0. This particular case is set up with I originally made this with 6 thousandths of gap space. Now I come out. This is an old case. It's just what I grabbed at the time. There, we can get the movement. See that right there is the extraction cam, the primary extraction cam, and here's going back down. This is an old, many times fired case. Too many times fired case. Now if I were to take a case that fits well, I think I can grab one out of my matchbox here. I'm kind of, as usual, I'm extemporating away. Okay, this one goes in and out nicely. So let's go ahead and watch this move. There it is. Primary extraction all the way open, goes down closed. Bam! It's almost touching down. That's the way I set them, is very tight to the end. It's not crimping, it's not actually touching down, but once I have my brass set up in such a way that it doesn't grow, I'm not going to recommend that anybody else do this. I'm not recommending this practice at all because I set my dies up so that my cases don't grow. Alright? If your cases grow, you would never want to run your gap space that tight. There I'm going from, watch my handle here, open handle. Don't know if I can, I'm gonna set this on manual now. Okay, so you're not gonna get it all, but I'm gonna get manual on the phone, and now I'm just gonna tell you what we're doing. You're gonna have to live with that. Right now I'm dragging the gun over, moving things over. Right now the handle is all the way up on the bolt. Bolt handle all the way up. Primary extraction cam has got the case popped out. Now as I close the bolt, that case drops right down, bottoms right out in that chamber. Bam! That's perfect. That's where I like it. I like a very small gap space. But what's critical is if a person is ever going to be watching my videos and I talk about a short gap space and I talk about fitted dies, what you should see on any kind of a factory gun is something like probably there. On any of your custom setups, if you don't have your dies set up so that you can utilize that absolutely no case growth thing. If your cases grow, if you have to trim them, then get one of these endoscopes if you don't have one, or use it for this function right here. Go in there and check that. A lot of unexplained pressure spikes can come from the fact that your cases have grown a little long. This one actually, trust me, comes to a dead stop before I tighten it down. I just fired it. Okay, bolted. Right here, primary extraction cam, bolt just top of its throw. This is the top of the bolt throw. Now all the way down the stroke, probably, probably 60 degrees, roughly, of bolt throw. It's almost the whole 90, but it's not. 70 degrees of bolt throw. There's the extraction cam, clink, 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 extract, clink. I just drop the bolt handle. Now I push the bolt handle down. And there's no motion there. Down, back up. Fired it again. This one's actually, okay, it's a Flavio Fare trigger in this one. And I'm playing with it. Not gonna say yay or nay on it. But this is, get yourself one of these Teslongs, if you don't already have one, and use it to check this right here. Because as I said, if your brass is growing, if it's touching the end of the chamber and crimping up around that corner at all, if it's running up that ridge, that's a 45-degree angle on 80% of the reamers in the world, and that brass comes up to it, I'm going to put this back on now that you can. I'm going to unplug the phone. It's hard on the, moving around like that is really hard on the connector. I don't like to do it on my phone. I've got a whole setup. I'm going to run this out a ways so that I can be here. I've got a whole setup on a little pad or a laptop where I've got fittings that actually come over and click in. Carrying the phone, or this is kind of a last resort, but it was the best way that I could see to film what I'm talking about. And that is that one of the biggest problems I see guys running into with, especially if they get into the opposite of bulk reloading, which is bulk shooting. And bench rest is where you really see it. There's a few things. If you're going to go out and practice for bench rest and you're going to shoot hundreds and thousands of rounds, and if you're going to shoot the same cases like I do over and over and over, it becomes really, this case has got 30 or 40 firings on it. I've already marked it with a Sharpie on the back in a silver, if you can see that. There's kind of a, I don't know if I can get the light right, but I buy Sharpies in all the metallics. Gold, silver are ones I use a lot. There's a few other, I forget what they are, kind of a bronzy with a reddish tint somewhere. Anyway, sometimes I mark them with black. But we're going to go through as I put this thing together. Pretty soon we're going to be building a load for my new idea, my tight twist 6 ppc, which has been done by other people. It's never been done by me. I don't know where to get load data for it. So we're going to make up load data. And while we're doing that case, we're going to fire cases to destruction, which means we're going to fire them all the way up through until the case is destroyed. And then we're going to back off. We're going to find our max loads that way, which is really how it's done, regardless of all the pressure gauges and the bombs and the CUPs and the sliders and the plungers and all of the, when I say bomb, one of the ways, well, you can look it up. Look it up on the internet. Bomb testing, proof testing. It's not a bomb like boom. It's like take this thing, stick it inside of a big steel thing with the bore plug to pull the trigger and measure the pressure when it bombs up. But in the real world, for real, what people don't tell you is the real way. Even if you work at a ballistics laboratory, even if you work at, better not say where you might work. Not tattling. This is what I do. Let me just forget all of that about what other people do. What I do is incrementally load this case up until we achieve case head expansion. Now, we don't measure that case head expansion because measurements are for phoebes. Measurements, or no, let's put it another way. Measurements are maybe for people that have skills that I don't have. I don't measure well. So I gauge things. Measuring, you'll find that when this expands, it doesn't expand all in the same direction. You get short sides, and all of that goes away when you just work with primer pocket expansion. The reason this case head expands is because the heavy pressure, too much pressure, goes out through the flash hole into the primer pocket area inside the primer, and it hydraulics the case head into expanding. That's your upper limit, as long as your bolt face is set up so that you don't start scrubbing or knocking holes out of your bolt face before that. Your upper limit is when the case head starts to expand. So when your primers get loose, that's all it is. Go very carefully, go very incrementally, and when your primers start to loosen up, you're too hot, period. You go on any inner tube forum and there'll be some guy on there every week saying, oh, I took this load right out of the book and there's no signs of pressure whatsoever, but a couple of fires, my primer, what's wrong with my brass? My primers are getting loose. It must be my chamber. It must be something. And they go through all kinds of, did I forget? No. If your primers are getting loose, people, the load's too hot. Period. There's nothing to say. Yeah, sometimes you can change the paradigm. Maybe you did forget, maybe you this, maybe. But the bottom line is, if there's enough pressure in there to expand that primer pocket, the load is too hot. But I'm not going to go into the ways to lower that pressure. You can leave the same amount of powder in there and expand. There's things that you can do. Different chambers cut different ways with different reamers. I've seen chambers cut with the same reamer that have enough variation between them that you can get 10 or 12 or even maybe 30 extra kernels of powder in the one that's a little fat. It also sizes quite a bit more, but if that reamer pusher is holding off to the side, and you think about that in your mind, a kernel of powder is not very big. You can lay quite a few of them around the perimeter of a case. If one chamber is a couple thou larger, which most people never notice, as long as your headspace is good. Well, headspace is only a small part of the equation. But you have two chambers that are identical, cut with the same reamer, except that in one of them your pusher held it off to the side, so this chamber is diametrically a little fatter than the other one. Two things are going to happen. Number one, it's going to hold more powder. Number two, it's going to take more powder to get up to pressure. Number three, you're going to end up with this whole fast barrel, slow barrel phenomenon because pressure equals velocity. Just one of a bunch of things that produce this the fast barrel, slow barrel phenomenon in my experience. So, where we're at here is finding our own maximum pressure settings for our own chambers and our own lots of powder and our own lots of primers and our own everything. And to do that, you shoot a lot. If you shoot a lot, and when I say a lot, I don't mean there's a lot of people that shoot a lot and they have 500 cases, and their way of shooting a lot is they have an AR or an AK or an AS or whatever A they got, and they take these 500 rounds and they dump them in a big vibrating bucket and they clean them, and then they run them through a progressive and they load them, and then they take them out and they rattle on the trigger and they shoot them. And that's volume reloading. Well, that's not volume reloading like I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is taking this case and loading it over and over and over along with its brethren. It might be 5 cases, it might be 20 cases, but you load them over and over. That's when the cases start to grow. So that's why I wanted to show this. It's so simple. Run that there bore scope in. It just runs in the muzzle. Pretty simple, actually. The old bore scope is running in right here, and it goes back through. With the Hawkeye, and this is why I say, I used to have to modify cases and drill out the primer hole, and I had a whole thing for that. And then with the Hawkeye, I would come in from this side, and I'd go in and inspect the gap. With this is just, this usage alone is worth buying a Teslong bore scope, just so that you can monitor that critical gap space. Because one of the things that'll get you is if you're shooting a lot and you're trying to remember, you're working with seating depth and you're working with pressures and tensions and weighing your powders and watching the wind, and you get all distracted and you keep running this thing through the reloading die and sticking it back in the gun and click bang, click bang, click bang, and all of a sudden you start getting some anomalous readings. It might be that that brass is growing and that gap space, that spot at the end, is starting to touch and then starting to roll in and starting to put little crimp, a little pressure on the bullet. So, if you're going to consider what I'm going to call bench rest style reloading, for lack of a better term, if you're going to consider accuracy reloading, fitted die reloading, true high-end, it all comes back to true high-end accuracy. And if you're going to try accuracy reloading, do yourself a favor, get yourself a Teslong of one sort or another, and constantly remember to go back in here and check that silliness at the back and make sure that you're not growing your cases long enough. My primary thing here is I've learned a lot, and I hopefully have some information that somebody somewhere can learn from and can use. But my primary goal always is the safety aspect. This is a safe sport. But just like car racing or boat racing or motorcycle racing or driving to church Sunday morning, if you drive to church Sunday morning and you have a tendency to get distracted and text your kids on the phone, or your girlfriend or your grandkids for that matter, you might die. And I mean, it's true, you're going to die anyway. You're only for stop. But why do it now? For myself, I got a lot of fun stuff to do. Let's not die now. By the same token, let's not wreck our guns. Let's not wreck our eyes. So my safety rant for today is wear those safety glasses. Wear those safety glasses. And be careful out there when you're loading. And get yourself a Teslong and go back in there and check that gap space and find out you don't get some anomalations in pressure readings. So, until the next time, that's my Teslong borescope preach.